Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of Tales of Azeroth, the Vrykul. Tales of Azeroth, if you've watched the first episode, you know entails the history of various races. Now, in this first series, I'm going to be covering the Vrykul, and in last episode, we covered the ancient history of the Vrykul, which takes us to the current times of World of Warcraft, or the much more recent times of World of Warcraft, and takes us into the lore behind that. And to start off, we have to start with the rise of the Lich King. Now, with the rise of the Lich King in Northrend, Arthas began testing his powers in the Frigid Lands, and the lost Vrykul tribes were slain by the Lich King's servants in their unending sleep, only to be reborn into powerful undead warriors. Now, shortly before the start of the war against the Lich King, he sent his Scourge minions to swarm Northrend, and destroying everything in their wake. And the Vrykul, who were still slumbering, awoke shortly after, starting with the ones in Jotunheim, the largest Vrykul village in Northrend. Many of them would actually come to believe that the Lich King was a form of god, namely the god of death, and as such pledged themselves to him and his Scourge. The Winterscorn were then made subservient to the Dragonflayer, kind of like as if they're some servants of them or something like that, which is quite interesting considering that, the Winterscorn were the biggest clan before the Dragonflayer. Now, while Arthas woke the Vrykul, it was simple greed that actually brought the Kavaldir to the shores of Northrend, and they sought to steal artifacts from the Vrykul burial ground in Howling Fjord called Shield Hill, and also disturbed the spirits of the dead, which the Tuskarr tried to lay to rest by returning stolen items. The Tuskarr were unsuccessful, and the Kavaldir were already under the sway of Mistress Helia, cursed to raid the coasts and take souls in her name. When the two opposing factions, Horde and Alliance, arrived in Northrend, they built two ports in the Howling Fjord. One was called Valgard, the human settlement, and the Vengeance Landing was the settlement of the Horde. Now, not more than a month later, the Vrykul of the Dragonflayer clan awoke, setting their wargs, soldiers, and proto-drakes on blasting and destroying the half-built walls of Valgard, and launching an ongoing series of attacks which were coordinated by Ingvar the Plunderer from Utgard Keep. And simultaneously, the Winterscorn were tasked with turning against Vengeance Landing, the Horde settlement. The Dwarven Explorers League speculated that the Vrykul were related to humans and that they were connected by evolution via a missing link. But a Draenei shaman, Thoralius the Wise, sent an Alliance adventurer into the spirit world to uncover the Vrykul's past, where it was uncovered that the Vrykul were actually the humans' progenitors and the missing link. Other Vrykul were often seen aiding the Scourge in their endeavors, holding competitions where many elite warriors competed for the chance to become powerful servants of the Lich King in Valhallas. The winners would become powerful Immerjar, an elite warrior caste created by the Lich King, and the loser would become Vargul, a lesser undead creature often used by the Vrykul for labor. They were raised by Valkyr, which were created by the Lich King in a mockery of Odin's Valkyr. And they are the inhabitants of Valkyrian aspired towards becoming one of the Valkyr that served the Lich King, and many actually obtained that. The Vrykul had become so powerful, in fact, that if Imran, the king of the Vrykul at the time, blew the horn to unite all of the leaders of the Immerjar and the Mjordan, that they would become a force more powerful than any other within the Scourge. But, unfortunately, Imran fell before he could ever return to Icecrown and blow the horn. Other Vrykul, which refused the call of the Lich King, such as the Hildnir, reasserted their loyalty to the Titans, or at least Keeper Thorim. Finally, within the halls of Ulduar, some Vrykul could be found as members of the Twilight's Hammer. The Mad Keeper Loken also used the Forge of Wills to create new Iron Vrykul, uncorrupted by the Curse of Flesh, to serve his Iron Army. Which takes us to the fall of the Lich King. By the time Icecrown Citadel was besieged, most of the Vrykul loyal to the Scourge had either been killed or wiped out entirely in Icecrown. With the Lich King's defeat atop his frozen throne, some remaining Valkyr pledged themselves to the Banshee Queen Sylvanas Windrunner. During Cataclysm, a group of Vrykul joined Twilight's Hammer and became Twilight Drake riders in service of Deathwing as his personal guard. And in Pandaria, Lore Walker Cho showed an undead their ancestors, revealing the Vrykul at the very top, confirming the humans' evolutionary line. In Legion, we finally discovered the Vrykul in Stormheim, and apparently these Vrykul were once ruled by a king until recently before our arrival. His son, Jarl Skovald, murdered him with the assistance of his brothers, and these brothers then turned on each other for supremacy. Skovald proving to be the most efficient and the most powerful, rising above the rest of his brothers, and obviously killing his brothers. Skovald turned on his mother as well and killed her at Kingsfall Pass, proclaiming himself king thereafter. During the invasion of the Legion, Gul'dan proposed to God King Skovald to join the Legion and receive ultimate power or be destroyed. Skovald, whose mind was filled with dreams of conquest and glory, allied himself and his Tidescorn with the Legion and sought to claim the Pillars of Creation for their demonic masters. Skovald sought access to the Halls of Valor and thus perverted ancient trials of the Vrykul in order to gain access. During his Trial of Might, he shattered Jotnar instead of simply besting him in battle, and he attempted to destroy Agramar's vault so no one could repeat the trial or know the criteria for it from the Titan databases. In his Trial of Will, he did not seek the blessing of the Thorignir, but instead opted to enslave them. The Thorignir are a race of dragons blessed by the storm. And during his Trial of Valor, he used the Bone Speakers to enslave ancient rulers of Stormheim, and forcing their blessing upon himself rather than earning it. At the same time, Odin, under the guise of Havi, aids an Order champion in their quest to beat the trials and retrieve the ages before Skovald. And while the Tidescorn, now called Fellscorn with their allegiance to the Burning Legion, assaulted the Gates of Valor, both challengers met. Skovald left the fight before there could be a victor, and Odin's own challenges were then beaten within the Halls of Valor, earning the champion's claim to the ages before Skovald. At this time, Skovald appeared and demanded Odin acknowledge his claim, a protest that came too late, according to Odin. Skovald followed up his demands with trying to claim the ages by force by besting the champion, but faced his demise against the champion, declaring that all his plans were brought to ruin with his final breath. Other Vrykul did not follow his allegiance to the Legion and instead remained loyal to Odin. These Vrykul mainly stood in Valdisdal, and an adventurer took up arms against the demons along with Odin and his Valarjar, and was later proclaimed the Battle Lord of the Valarjar army. The Tomb of the Old Kings contains several remains of great Vrykul kings. Odin sent his new champion there with Hruthnir, son of Magnar Icebreaker, to reclaim the armament of the Black Worm. If you want a little bit information or context to who Magnar Icebreaker is, I will tell you now. So, according to lore, the ancestral homeland Stormheim was actually once occupied by highborn elves, but Vrykul forces led by King Magnar Icebreaker launched a massive attack on the elves and surprised them with their ferocity. The elves and the Vrykul skirmished for weeks, and the Vrykul scored immediate victories and gained enough momentum to push the highborn out of the city. And though the elves attempted to reclaim Stormheim during the Battle of Suramar Pass, they ended up losing against the Vrykul, forced to flee and never make a claim upon Stormheim again. However, shortly after, traders loyal to the Sea Witch Helia and her Hellarjar rose up within Magnar's ranks and killed the king and his son Hruthnir, but Magnar's people were able to rally and prevented the Hellarjar from claiming the rest of Stormheim. So that's a little bit of context to who Magnar Icebreaker really is. So, the armament of the Black Worm was a weapon once wielded by Hruthnir's father, Magnar Icebreaker. However, the tomb was twisted and contorted by unholy magic from the Legion, and the guardian of his tomb did not recognize Odin's envoys, nor his own son. The champion and Hruthnir quickly dealt with Magnar Icebreaker, the father of Hruthnir, and vanquished the tortured spirits and relinquishing Magnar from the foul magic. Magnar regained his senses and gave up his armament to the champion to avenge his death in fighting Helia. He was later sent to the Halls of Valor and became a recruitable champion. In Shield Hill, the spirit of Gorvold Ironbrow was called by Tahu Sagewind and Oric Trueheart in order to find the location of an artifact of the light. Gorvold's story led the Paladins group to the Tomb of the Old Kings as well. Inna the Crypt Stalker tried stopping the Despoilers but was killed by said Paladins. And in the Shrine of the Truth Guard Irgrim, the Truth Seeker, Champion of Tyr and Runeshaper Griselda challenged the Paladins group and lost the battle, later coming to accept his defeat and giving up Truth Guard in order for the future of the High Lord of the Silver Hand to become the new champion of Tyr. Prustaga helped the Unseen Path to Prustaga actually also sought to venture in the Tomb of the Old Kings in order to reclaim Titan Strike, a weapon originally wielded by Warlord Voland. So during this quest line, Prustaga is trying to claim Titan Strike and seeks to basically take the weapon for herself. Basically, what ends up happening is the one champion of the Hoarder Hall from the Hunters actually engages in combat with Prustaga as she tries to intrude in the in the Tomb of the Old Kings. However, Prustaga manages to get away from the tomb with the weapon and led her followers to the Temple of Storms in Northrend to absorb the power of the storm and the Makers into the Titan Strike. But Prustaga was stopped by the Adventurers, and Titan Strike was claimed by the champion. So that concludes that part of the story, and then several Vrykul from the Valar Jar led by Thorim Himdall and the Battle Lord helped free Hodir from Lady Ranzara and her demons as well. Sigrin, heir of Skovald's legacy, was prophesied by Aegir to unite the Tidescorn once more against the Legion. Seeking to make right the damage done by her father, Sigrin decided to live up to her fate. She defeated the leaders of the Bone Speakers and Drekkarjar in single combat, forcing them to acknowledge her claim. But her brother, Torvald, whom she believed to be dead, revealed that her assassination was actually ordered by Odin, which Aegir then later confirmed. Sigrin was consumed by her anger, letting the fell power in her blood consume her. She attempted to confront Odin, but an Order champion was able to persuade her otherwise. She apologized to Aegir for her rampage and sought judgment instead. Despite her rampage and misgivings, she showed that she possessed the strength and willpower to overcome the Fell, a feat that no Vrykul had established before, and Aegir thus decided that instead of being punished, she was to assume the burden of the crown and rule the Tidescorn as their god queen. During Battle for Azeroth, during the Fourth War actually, Zandalar opened its port to non-trolls for the first time in centuries, which resulted in a group of Vrykul traders traveling there for trading, as well as one in Borealis Harbor. The Bloodwake clan from Jorindal Island sailed the seas with their fleet, led by the greatest raider to ever live, Jorun, who left Stormheim long ago to seek a life at sea. And then, during the Exploring Azeroth novel, after the war against the Jailer, the Bronzebeard brothers revisited Northrend and reported that the Vrykul clans are mostly keeping to themselves. The Winterscorn mostly rebuilt Scorn, while the Dragonflayer actually continued to attack Valgard due to the to how close it is to Wormskull Village. They also reported that Galarbron is still half filled with slumbering Vrykul, slowly being coaxed back into walking life by Vrykul Necrolords. And in Grizzly Hills, the Voldrune Vrykul have actually been quiet, assumingly because of the Horde troops in Conquest Hold. And in Sholasar Basin, they are still coming to Savage Thicket in order to capture wild proto-dragons. And in Ice Crown, the Vrykul are still challenging each other in the Pit of Valhallas, even though they have no death god to serve. Obviously still with that Valkyr overlooking them and raising them into undeath when they do reign victorious. And that brings us to today. We haven't really received any new information with Dragonflight for Vrykul, but that is kind of all we have in terms of the information. And I do think that it's pretty interesting what we know so far. Now, in the next video, we're going to be talking about the various types of Vrykul and their kind of origin, in short, and talk about all of that. If I need to make the video longer, if that's like not enough for a proper video, I will also probably add in the clans as well. Now, the original plan is actually for me to split the clan video and the types of Vrykul video part, split it in two. But if one ends up being too short, I can just add it to the actual video as one. That's all I've had to say for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, I love doing this type of stuff. It's really just my kind of thing. If you enjoyed, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and turn on your notifications to receive a notification every time I upload a new video. I'm hoping to carry this lore video tradition forward, and I will be seeing you next time. Bye bye.